Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, where you can awaken your mind to clarity and success even in today's life challenges. We're here to provide insights and solutions that will help you live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hi, this is Joanne Victoria, the I Know What Works coach, and I'm the author of 7 books, including Lighting Your Path, How to Create the Life You Want, and Pushy for a Moment, Instant Solutions to Everyday Challenges. I'm also the host of the Sanity Project podcast. The Sanity Project podcast is a platform for experts in the personal development and business communities to share their wisdom, expertise, and solutions that will help the listener live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Our guest today is Chelsey Brooke. Chelsey Brooke is a professional counselor, published writer, blogger, Pathfinder Coach, an internationally known figure helping introverted women live a passionate and purposeful life. Chelsey has reached thousands of introverted women with her positive and powerful message to discover your true path to create a life and career that's authentic, inspired, and fulfilled. What Chelsey is going to be talking to us about today is introverted women and the imposter syndrome, plus as much else as she can fit into this time. And I invited her specifically because she deals with introversion. And introversion sometimes looks different to different people, and I'm going to have Chelsey explain that. So how can you talk to us about introversion and how it relates to who we are, what we do, and what we think about ourselves, as well as what others think about us?
Yes. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. Great question to get us started. So one of the first things that I always want to explain to people is what introversion is not, because all of us have probably heard a lot of myths and misconceptions around introversion. So I actually did some research and I looked up what the dictionary defines an introvert as, just out of curiosity. And it says a shy, withdrawn person, which I found really interesting because it's incorrect, really, and it sadly shows the bias that's so prevalent in our culture against introverts. So introversion and shyness are not the same thing. So some introverts are shy, but extroverts can also be shy too. Introversion has to do with your temperament that you're born with, and then shyness is actually a social anxiety that can affect any personality type. So the biggest difference between introverts and extroverts is how we process and respond to information and different environments. So it's kind of like this. Extroverts hear something, they're having a conversation, and they respond. There's not a lot of processing time in between. They're just kind of saying the first thing that comes to their mind. Whereas introverts hear something, or they're asked a question, or they're in a conversation, and we actually have a longer pathway that we take in our brain. So it takes more pit stops, if you will, in the brain. And so we begin to think about possible answers we could give, what the reaction to those answers might be. Other times we've been asked questions like that. Then we start thinking about which way we want to respond and try to find the right words. And by this point, it's been far too long and people wonder if you're okay or they've moved on altogether. And another big difference is that introverts are drained by interacting with other people or even being in busy environments, even when they're enjoying themselves or around people that they like, while extroverts become more excited and pumped up from being around people and get drained when they're alone. So that's kind of the basic differences between introverts and extroverts. And of course, I can go into a more brain-based explanation if you'd like, but those are just two of the big differences between introverts and extroverts.
Yeah, I experienced that myself, being an introvert, which will probably shock people who are listening to this because I don't even think they would have thought that I was an introvert, but I am also quite drained by crowds of people. I have to, when I leave the house, I have to make sure that I do it on any Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, because on Mondays and Fridays for work, Mondays and Fridays, there are so many people on the freeway and so many people at any store that I go to that it's really weird. It's like, go away. I just want to be left. I want to be in my bubble. I need my bubble for protection. And
that's such a good point, though, and that's working with your strengths instead of against them as much as you can. You know what drains you, and that being out in crowds is draining. So you shift your schedule to adjust for that. And I love that, instead of feeling like, there's nothing wrong with you. A lot of times introverts are grow up feeling that way, especially from comments from other people about how we need to talk more, stop being antisocial, get out of your shell, stop overthinking, all those things. But exactly, you can just work with your strengths instead of against them.
Yeah, it's once I became aware that I was an introvert and how it had affected me with with some of the things that you're speaking about today, it was a shock to me. But then it was, my God, that's what the problem has been. There's no problem. There's just that I was acting as if I were an extrovert. I was living as if I were an extrovert, and as I was in sales, and that's I know, for years. And I was successful, but not aware of why I would be so tired and raising the children and just lying down at night, going to watch some TV to relax and just winding up there on the couch all night long, just wiped out. Had no idea.
Right. Yeah, and you begin to wonder, like you said, what's wrong with me? Why can't I handle stuff? Why can't I just, be like an extrovert, basically? And so it is so liberating and freeing when you finally realize who you are and what that means and how it affects you.
Oh, I was vibrating in my chair when I realized what I was. It was like I was bouncing, because it was like, oh my God. I don't have to tell you, but my God, it was as if I found the Holy Grail. So what about introverts in the workplace?
Yes, that's definitely a big one, because as we're talking about, there's so many differences between introverts and extroverts, and extroverts are kind of, they've been, it seems, running the workplace, and so they set it up to where it's a lot more extrovert friendly usually. So that's definitely something that can be a challenge for introverts. If you're in a kind of typical workplace environment, it's not usually set up to really cultivate your strengths. And so introverts kind of have to learn to advocate for themselves authentically. And the first step to doing that is to really get rid of everything you think you know about advocating for yourself. As an introvert, advocating for yourself is totally different than you might think of, having to be very bold and brazen and go out there and speak up for yourself. That just feels very inauthentic. So the first step for introvert style advocacy is to, first of all, understand yourself, like we're talking about. Once you realize how your brain works and how it affects your behaviors, your thoughts, your feelings, your moods, and how you get drained by, different environments and things like that, it can be so freeing and then really helpful in advocating for yourself. So that's the first step, is just knowing more about who you are. And then the second step is educating other people on your strengths and preferences, but not necessarily in a way where you have to go explain everything to everyone or make sure that they understand, because honestly, people around you may never understand or accept it, but just you being you and being okay with that. If you need, to take a break and you want to maybe go to your car and have lunch instead of go to the break room, that has to be okay. And even doing that, that is advocating for yourself, because you're saying, I need a break and that's okay. It's okay for me to do this. I don't have to be like everyone else. And then the third part is finding ways to work with your strengths instead of against them. It's really important to recognize that what works for you is perfectly okay, because we receive so many messages about how being a team player and having boundless energy and sharing your thoughts spontaneously during group meetings is the right way to be. But this being is really counterproductive and counterintuitive for most introverted personality types. So once you understand why those methods don't work, you're much more likely to feel prepared and justified to explain those differences to others and just to live in a way that's more authentic to who you are.
Okay. You must, the way I see it, an introvert must have boundaries.
Yes, absolutely. That's huge.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about. Part of what you're talking about, if you don't want to eat lunch with others and, it's like you need the break from people.
Right. Exactly. Otherwise, your brain, it literally just goes into overwhelm. And it's not even for, environments that you don't like to be in, but for, family events that you do enjoy, or being around, your spouse or friends or whoever. It's just draining to you. It's just the fact that there's another person, or if it's a busy environment, even if it's somewhere you enjoy going, it's just draining your energy. So you have to have that time alone. And of course, that brings up a lot of difficulties, because our culture is so into how many social events you have, how many things you're going to, how many things are you hosting. And that can just be completely overwhelming for introverts. And a lot of times we feel a lot of guilt and shame about needing time to ourselves. So that is why it's so important to be educated on who you are, why you are like that, and that's nothing against people, because you're always going to kind of be at odds with society as long as we have an extroverted dominated culture. So knowing who you are, and then knowing that it's okay to set those boundaries, to take time away and be just alone and be in silence. It's so important.
Yeah, that's why I go to the library often and always have books by me, because for me, books are easier than groups of people. It's like somebody said, well, come to this networking event, and then, short of having a heart attack,
It's the last thing you want to do.
The last thing I want to hear. I don't care, maybe something special like the Queen comes over from England or something, but it has to be.
Yeah, it's got to be worth it.
It's got to be worth the energy and the effort that I'm putting out, because I always tell people the only way I go to a networking group is if I'm in front of the room presenting. Other than that, I don't network.
Yes, I think that's so interesting, because a lot of introverts actually make great leaders and great speakers. And you would think, I actually had someone tell me in college, they didn't tell me about a teaching opportunity because they assumed I wouldn't be interested because I was an introvert.
Oh. And
I'm like, really? I cannot believe that. Because if you think about it, when you're a speaker or a leader or a teacher, depending on where you're teaching at, but as far as leading and speaking, you're really not necessarily engaging with everyone. You're just presenting information. So
Correct.
It's not as draining as you would think. It's definitely not as draining as interacting with everyone and how other jobs can be. So.
No, it's right. Being being in front of the room with looking at all of these people, I don't care the size of the room. There's no pressure at all as far as, the introvert extrovert concept. But it's if I have to sit in the room with that, I'm either in the front row if I care, or I'm in the last row because I don't care.
Right.
And I have to have the door near me so I can run.
Yep, you always have to have an exit plan. I do tell people that. It's so comforting to know. You feel much more in control going into something if you know how to get out of it.
Yeah, you just have to have that. Otherwise, I can't explain it. I don't have to explain it to you, but everybody who's listening and who has been in that position, you know what I'm talking about, and you know what Chelsey is talking about. So is there a relationship from your perspective between imposter syndrome for women and introverted women?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I definitely think there's a connection. So imposter syndrome, thinking or feeling like you don't belong, like basically you've achieved some level of success or achievement or something, and at some point it's just going to come and all be taken away from you. And I think as women, we can definitely feel that way, unfortunately, because we haven't always had the workplace roles or been in leadership positions and things like that, and that's definitely changing. But for introverted women especially, I think, because they not only have the feminine aspect of their job, but the introvert part, where you always feel like you are being compared to extroverts, and that extroversion is the standard, and that there's something wrong with you. So as you develop and as you try to work toward certain roles or certain leadership positions, as an introverted woman, you may be even more susceptible to feeling like you don't really belong here, you don't really have what it takes. And that is why it's so important to know yourself and to develop that self-belief in who you are, because a lot of times introverts over their lifetime have been told these labels that don't really fit us. Like I said, we're antisocial, we're rude, we're cold, we're distant, we're boring, we're withdrawn, all these things. And that's not really what speaks out to you or what people say as being a great leader or having a great position at work. So I definitely think that's something that introverted women especially have to be aware of, and why it's even more important to spend time, stripping away all those labels and the misconceptions that you might have heard and accepted to some extent over your life, and learn what it means to be you and to be authentic with that, the core of who you are outside of the labels and the misconceptions that are placed on you. So
what would you, let's see, what are some self-care habits for introverts? I know we've covered a couple, but what what can you tell our introverted women, our normal women who are extroverted, I guess? Isn't that amazing when I just said normal women being not an introvert? But people who are listening right now who want to pass this podcast off to their friends and family, what can you tell us about some self-care habits for introverts?
Yes, I love that question. So kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier about the importance of setting boundaries. I cannot speak about that enough because with so many introverted people that I've worked with now, that is one that keeps coming up over and over again, especially with our friends, with our families, because a lot of times our families don't necessarily understand introversion, even if we explain it. And that's something else, is you have to get to the point where you can explain yourself, but you don't require other people to understand it for it to be okay. Because that's something that we assume a lot of times is if we can maybe explain it, then they can understand, then it'll make our lives easier somehow because we won't feel as pressured and they'll be okay with us taking time away or not going to every family function or event or whatever. And that's just not the case. So learning about yourself, feeling more empowered that I need this time and space is just how my body works. It's just like eating healthy or drinking water. It's no different for an introvert to need time and space away from crowds and people, even people they love. So definitely knowing how to set boundaries, knowing who you are, owning your schedule goes with that as well. We are bombarded with expectations and responsibilities today of home, family, work, just so much is on us. So more than ever, we have to know how to own our schedule. And that means setting your intention about what your values are, and then making sure that you have time in your daily and weekly schedule for those values, and then making sure that yourself and your self-care and scheduling in times to just get away from everything is a priority in your schedule. That's definitely part of taking care of yourself. And learning to say no, I would say, is another big one, because a lot of times I found as introverts a lot too, we tend to feel guilty for having to say no or having to set boundaries, and we feel like we have to over-explain or justify ourselves. And no can be okay. No is enough to say, I'm sorry, I can't make it this time. You guys have a great time. Thank you for the invite. Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm not going to be able to make it. I already have plans. That's okay too. And you don't need everyone to accept or agree for you to advocate for yourself and give yourself time for what you need.
No is a complete sentence.
Right. I love that.
Yeah, no is a complete sentence. When you have to say no, I try not to give too many explanations for when I say no, because people, they're only going to hear what they want to hear anyway, because that's the way we are as people. It's just, they hear no and everybody shuts down. But these are important. So you have set boundaries. You have to need time. You have to create your own time and space, and you have to own your schedule. Yes.
Yeah, that's definitely important, especially for the working woman who probably has, family and work responsibilities and so much that's pulling and tugging at you, and you can feel in the middle so much. And a lot of times your self-care comes last, but everything suffers if your self-care comes last. If you're in a better place, then you're able to give more of yourself and be more present wherever you are. So it really is a priority.
What is it going to take for people to understand, to acknowledge that they come first in their life? It's, even whether you have children or not, people go, oh, my kids, your kids will not suffer if you put yourself first, because if you don't put yourself first, you're coming from an empty well. And what benefit would you be to anybody if you're drained?
Yeah, exactly. I think it goes back to the guilt that we have, and I think a lot of us are just raised that we're supposed to think of others, and maybe we feel guilty or feel like we're selfish by thinking of ourselves as well. But I forget exactly the quote, but something about self-esteem is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. So it's not that you don't have time for others and things like that, but you don't have to belittle yourself or dismiss your own needs in the process. You can still think about others, think about their needs, but also remember that you're a person too, and that you need the same time as well.
Okay, so I'm looking at this other one too, is brain-based success mindset strategies. Talk a bit about that.
Yes. So that's another huge one that I work with my clients on a lot, because as we talked about how important it is to know that you're an introvert to really succeed in your life and work and relationships, it's also crazy how much we don't understand about how the brain works. So it's like you would never expect a pilot to get in an airplane and fly it and know what to do, but all of us have this amazing computer in our brain that is our brain, and we don't exactly know how it works and what's going on. So something that I teach my clients and I talk about a lot is understanding the two main jobs of the brain, which is to keep you safe and to conserve energy. So that's part of the reason that doing something new or starting a new goal can be so difficult, because the first part is to conserve energy, meaning basically your brain wants to take the path of least resistance. So whatever you are used to doing is what your brain wants to do. It's kind of like we create pathways in our brain, kind of like in a forest or a trail or something that's been walked on over and over and over again. It creates a clear path. Something that you're trying to blaze a new trail it's less clear. There's more brush and stuff in the way. It's the same way in our brain. The neurons that wire together, and they create these pathways in our brain. And so if you're used to, not following through on tasks or being late or whatever the habit is that you want to break, your brain wants to stay that way. It doesn't matter if it's a healthy habit, unhealthy habit. It just does whatever you've done most of. And then the other part is your brain wants to keep you safe, and that's from real or imagined harm or physical or emotional. So if you think of starting a goal, doing something new, pursuing your dream, obviously that can be scary. It's new, and so that signals to the brain that it's scary. So your brain starts to think about, okay, what about other times that you have tried to do something new or set a goal? Was there ever any emotional pain associated with that? Did you actually achieve that goal? Or was there any humiliation or rejection or disappointment that came from that? And most of us can say, yes, of course, there's times we haven't followed through. So that immediately takes our willpower and motivation away, and then our fear part of our brain starts to take over. And then we all of a sudden, lose our motivation or our energy to move toward whatever that goal is. And sometimes we don't even know why. And that's also linked to procrastination. We just can't seem to get over that hump to just get us moving toward our goal. So those are some really important things to know, how it works, and that's huge to learning how to overcome those obstacles and fears that are going to come up for everyone, but it's just knowing how to overcome them when they do.
Well, sometimes I ask questions of my clients, when they've hit a bump and they have not they need another pathway in their brain, and the neuroplasticity is a word that they don't understand. I always ask them, who would they need to be in order to get that X done, to reach that goal. Mm-hmm. If they were somebody else, who would they need to be? And then, approach it from that perspective. Some people go, what? They don't understand. Since we're all together and we're part of the whole, that we can do what somebody else does in a way that works for us.
Right. Yeah, that's a great strategy, because it really kind of circumvents having to develop that self-belief in yourself, because you can just channel someone else. It's kind of like when we're kids and we put on different roles. It's just bringing that imagination into adulthood and using it to achieve your goals and work towards something until you develop more self-belief in who you are. You can kind of channel that or put on the role of someone else in a helpful way to help you get more in tune with that part of yourself.
Okay, so when you're at work, those are all great, and I've written them down. When you're at work and you're surrounded by extroverts, because that's most of our world, how do you keep yourself? How do you protect yourself? How do you stay you?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. And part of it, of course, goes back to advocating for yourself, so understanding yourself, educating other people on that just by being you and making that okay, and then working with your strengths instead of against them. But some specific tips that I tell people to help them be genuine to who they are. First of all, as we're talking about, introverts are going to need that time away, that silent time. So if at all possible, if you can just get up, take a walk outside, if at all possible, go to your car for lunch instead of going to the break room, And do some conscious deep breathing, like just going to your car and staring at something that's sitting still, taking 6 slow, deep breaths, just resetting your system, creating a space for yourself if you can at work is really important. Having a consistent schedule and letting other people know when you're going to be available to talk to and when you're not, because getting interrupted is something that we introverts hate, because we can get so deep in thought about something and then to have to be asked, what do you want for lunch?
Yeah.
It can be disruptive, and it can take us 20 minutes to get back into the headspace that we were in deep into that thought. So again, owning your space and your schedule as much as possible is really important at work as well. And
I always tell people at the very worst, go hide in the bathroom.
Yeah, I know. It does give you a little bit of just sanity breathing time if you're just getting really overwhelmed. And I always tell introverts, again, use your strengths to your advantage. So a lot of introverts feel like they express themselves more easily through written communication as opposed to talking. So using email to send notes of appreciation or encouragement, or to say something that you wanted to add to a meeting or a group event or something like that can be helpful because you have time to process it. It also kind of makes you stand out because not everybody is sending email. Extroverts are going to be saying whatever comes up in the moment and then moving on. But if you think of something or you want to add something or send a note of appreciation or encouragement, you can always do that through email. And that gives you that time and space to think about it. And remembering to put your name on anything you create, help, or produce, because a lot of introverts also feel very inauthentic to, say, hey, I'm working on this. They feel like that's arrogant or talking about themselves too much, and we really don't tend to like attention on ourselves anyways. So just kind of sliding in the conversation, like, yeah, I really enjoyed working on this part. Like, what are you working on? And using your natural, listening skills, and just ask questions and be curious about people, and just put in there, things that you enjoyed or things that you're working on, and then bring it back to them and ask about them and connect it with something that you can ask a question to, so you don't feel like you're just throwing it in there to talk about yourself. And as far as group meetings, I know a lot of us have group meetings at our workplaces. Preparing what you want to say beforehand and writing it down. I know a lot of introverts feel more authentic when they're prepared versus when they're spontaneous. So writing down what you want to say before the meeting starts, and then if you want to make a comment, try to make one in the beginning, toward the beginning of the meeting, as opposed to in the middle or just waiting until an opportune time, because a lot of introverts hate doing that as well. We hate the attention on us, having to raise our hand. We feel like we're making a big deal about something, and we don't want to interrupt. We feel like it's kind of interrupting to just blurt out what you think. So saying something in the beginning, making a comment, lets other people know you're engaged, but then you can just kind of relax afterwards and sit back and listen and observe, which is our comfort zone.
There we go, people. I want you to re-listen to this podcast over and over again, because I'm sure the things that you've heard are just the top layer. So you want to go back and catch all the layers in this 7-layer cake that Chelsey Brooke has presented to you about women as introverts, or introverts as women, in the workplace and in the world. And you can find Chelsey Brooks at the pathfinderforyou.com, normal spelling. And Chelsey also has a surprise for our listeners. What is that surprise?
Yes. So right now I'm offering a free training series on the 3 steps that I help my clients with, which is, first of all, to figure out your passion and to know what that is. So there's a 5-step template within the training. You're also going to get some information on how to develop self-belief in exactly who you are and what you're capable of. So, develop self-belief that's authentic to who you are and removes all the labels that have been placed on you. And then the third part is having that success mindset. So whenever those fears or doubts come up, you know exactly what to do to redirect those and still move toward your goals. So people can find that at thepathfinderforyou.com/free.
There we go. And it's going to be up by the time you get this. And as I said before, everybody listen to this. Have your coworkers, friends, frenemies, family listen to this. If they need further explanation on introverts, Chelsey Brooke has come up with some great examples and some strategies and some patterns and habits that will help you feel more successful at home and at work. You can check my Facebook at askjoannevictoria.com. You can go to the podcast page, blog page. You can also go to my coaching page and see the 2 coaching products that I have available for you today, and you can also ask questions there. Everybody have a great day. I'm so glad everybody is listening, and I'm grateful to have Chelsey Brooke here today, and everybody take care. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to askjoannevictoria.com to listen to more podcasts. Check out Joanne's coaching programs and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Life-Work Harmony. That's askjoannevictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.